The history of martial law in the Philippines.
Good day, everyone! How are you feeling? How's your day? Today, I'm going to discuss about a topic, and this topic has been described as one of the worst that happened in the Philippine history that left permanent scar in the lives of many Filipinos during that time. This topic was entitled The History of Martial Law in the Philippines. But before we proceed, let us first read what are the objectives. First, students must engage in navigating the history of martial law. The second one, they were able to know what are the impacts of martial law in the Philippines during that time. But as we go through to our discussion, I want to ask you what comes in your mind when someone is asking even your teacher what is martial law? And does your grandparents mention this kind of topic to you? So, before I start discussing, I want you to listen attentively and watch while learning. What is martial law? Any idea? So, generally, martial law is the replacement of civilian government by military rule and then the suspension of civilian legal processes for military powers. In the Philippines, or in Filipino, Batas Militar sa Pilipinas, martial law refers to the various historical instances in which the Philippine head of state places all or part of the country under the military control, most prominently during the administration of Ferdinand Marcos. In other words, martial law involves the temporary substitution of military authority for civilian rule and is usually invoked in time of war, rebellion, or natural disasters. Martial law, also known as the Proclamation of 1081. Proclamation number 1081 was the document which contained the formal proclamation of martial law in the Philippines by President Ferdinand Marcos as announced on the public on September 23, 1972. But martial law was declared on the evening of September 21, 1972. But it was made known public formally on September 23, 1972 with the Proclamation of 1081. Here are the some newspaper after Marcos declared the military rule in the Philippines. The Sunday Express, like Ferdinand declares martial law, then the Proclamation 1081. So, who really was President Marcos? Or who is President Marcos? President Marcos or Ferdinand Marcos Sr. in his full name, Ferdinand Emmanuel Adrelin Marcos Sr. was born on September 11, 1917 and died on September 28, 1989 after 3 years that he was toppled from his power. And he is a Filipino politician, a lawyer, a dictator, and kleptocrat who was the 20th President of the Philippines from 1965 up to 1986. His dictatorship lasted until he was toppled from his power, and he is only the president that recorded in the Philippine history that lasted 20 years in his power, or 2 decades.
After his governance in the Philippines, in the 5 years, when 1970 and 1972, it was the year that President Marcos was re-elected as a president. The youths started to seek improvement in the government. They started to reforms against the governments, and then they were inspired by domestic and international problems. And then the military took it as a threat that they imprison the youth activists or the students together with the rebel authors. And we can say that during this time, the activists and the authors were the real patriots and historical heroes. Are the reasons why martial law was declared. So basically, it was declared and claiming it was the last defense against the rising disorder, increasingly violent demonstrations.
Why did Marcos place the Philippines under the military rule? So, a lot of saying, or this was also the time when the youths once more proved that it is not the constant evasion that shape our races and nationalism, and the youths became completely rebellious. Not only did the dead marches, but also they held pen with the red paint and wrote in their placards "Makibaka" or "To Dare." Together with the rebel authors, they did the bloody demonstration. The bloody demonstration known as nowadays as rally or rallied. Another reasons, the violent demonstrations that made all over the country. One of these are the Muslim separatist movement of the Moro National Liberation Front or MNLF, the alleged threats of Communist Insurgency Party of the Philippines, the CPP, and one of his actions was to arrest the opposition politicians in the Congress and the constitutional conventions, and then the Battle of Mandola. This kind of different torture during the martial law, like electric shock. Electric shock may seem very familiar to us, as well as the beating, then the San Juanico Bridge, the Truth Serum, and then the Russian roulette. What really happened in the Philippines after the martial law was declared, or what happened a year after martial law was implemented? So, there are human rights abuse, the media were controlled and shut, the bombing in different places. We will discuss this one by one. Free press is key feature of functioning democracy, where media serves as a watchdog and source of information of all citizens. Not until Marcos controlled the people access and the kind of information they got and made sure that he has a final say to his so-called truth. Is the media were controlled and shut down, take over of private media. On September 22, 1972, Marcos issued Letter of Instruction Number 1 that contained authorizing the military to take over the assets of major media outlets nationwide. Then Marcos linked the networks to conspiracy with the Communist Party. He said that the owners and officers of ABS-CBN and ABC are engaged in subversive activities against the government and are participants in a conspiracy to overthrow the government. These are the facts of Letter of Instruction number 1 after Marcos issued to the public. Number 2, arrest of journalists, media owners. According to San Juan's 1978 article, which was published in the award-winning magazine's Index of Censorship, on the evening of the proclamation of martial law, the leading mass circulation, dailies, weekly magazines and journals, radio and television stations were shut down by soldiers in full combat gear. Thousands of journalists, editors, radio and television personnel were arrested and thrown in jail without due process. They were arrested without consent after the martial law was declared, and the most worst is the media were shut and controlled. The people's voice were deprived. Those who were arrested are Teodoro Locsin Sr., the publisher of the Philippines Free Press, was arrested and imprisoned on the first week of martial law. The Manila Times publisher, Mr. Chino Rosas, and several journalists, including Luis Beltran, Maximo Soliven, Amando Doronila, and Juan Mercado were also arrested. And he did not escape. Eugenio Lopez Jr., the ABS-CBN owner, was also arrested and imprisoned in Fort Bonifacio. More journalists were harassed and imprisoned during the regime. So it was saying that during the martial law, the most or the victims are the journalists.
Even the religious publications were not able to escape the President Marcos order, and then the expulsion of the visa rejection of foreign journalists. Throughout the history, the journalists have sought to be the voice of the people. They expose the wrongdoings of the government and serve as the watchdog against the injustice. But unfortunately, their powers or the powers of the journalists was removed from them, and they can no longer share about the truth behind the government wrongdoings.
So let's proceed to the human right abuse. So civilians have also experienced the brutal governance of military, because the military during the time overused their powers and privileges. They did something injustice towards the civilians. They imprisoned people. So about 70,000 were in prison, and then 34,000 people were tortured according to Amnesty International, and then 3,240 were killed from 1972 up to 1981 until the martial law was ended. Then during this dark period or chapter of the Philippine history, thousands of people were subject to various forms of torture. These various forms of tortures is what I mentioned a while ago, such as the electric shock, the beating, the San Juanico Bridge, the roulette Russia, like that, and then the different kinds. Bombing at Plaza Miranda and different places. The Plaza Miranda bombing name was familiar to us, am I right? Because it is one of the biggest crimes in our country during the martial law that remains unresolved. On August 21, 1971, bomba did explode in Plaza Miranda and the two powerful grenades rocked the rally. One missed the stage, blasting people on the spot, killing 8, among them a 10-year-old girl Banjor, and seriously injuring 120 civilians. The other grenade landed on stage, maiming all senatorial candidates. The most critically injured are Senator Jovito Salonga and Senator John Osmania. These are the list of bombing in different places during or after the martial law was implemented. Then January 22, ESO and Caltex bombing. August 21, 1971, Plaza Miranda bombing, one of the biggest crime in the Philippines. And then March 15 up to September 8, 1972. These are the different places where bombing take place. So there's a lot of victims during this time, civilians or other people, innocent. So many innocent lives were lost during this year. Martial law had or have also a good impacts because at that time the people were disciplined and crimes were almost or totally vanished. In this regime also they were able to reduce the violent urban crime, the unregistered firearms, and the suppressed communists in government in some areas. Also, the inevitable ones are the negative impacts of martial law in the Philippines. Then, one of the most significant negative effects of martial law is the potential of human right abuses. As the government is given sweeping powers that can be used to suppress dissent and opposition. Then, the death of democracy, since the declaration had made people be mute for a moment and there was no freedom of the press. The rights of the people to speak their opinions about the current situation were totally denied and deprived. And then it was also created a stronger military power which caused harm to the civilians. Some of the military took advantages while they were close and the president needed them. So the negative impacts, the media were shut, the human rights abuses, as well as the military abused their powers and privileges because they were close to President Marcos. They did something wrong and injustice towards the civilians. We need to know also that no matter how hard the Marcoses try to make us forget, we remember that thousands were killed or tortured during these times, including the innocent life, the journalists, the students, especially those youth activists. Their human rights were undoubtedly violated. Their families suffered and left the nation in chaos. References.
Thank you for your listening, and I hope that you learned something new from today's discussion. I am Arya Nicole S. Martinez, Utak, Puso, Tatak City High, Have a great day ahead, everyone! Bye!